Some 600 miles from Adelaide, just north of the Transcontinental Railway, is the remote and lonely village of Maralinga. Here was the site of an experiment with man's most revolutionary discovery, the atom bomb.
I first came here to Maralinga in 1972, 44 years ago. So over the years I've been in and out of this place, so I know the history pretty well, so I will be able to relate it to you. What we're going to do is the first half of the day will actually be tied up with explaining the history about this place as we go from site to site. And then we'll be out at Taranaki, where the largest atomic bomb went off on the Australian mainland, around about lunchtime. Have some lunch out there, and then we'll do the atomic side of the tour, where we go to the different ground zeros, different bomb sites and that. We'll do that in the afternoon. Now this little ridge we're coming up to now, heading to the dam, just over the ridge there you'll see the big steel halfway tank on the right hand side. Well, that's holding 500 tonne of rainwater now. And why we call it the halfway tank is because it's halfway between the dam and Maralinga village. Now, this area is known as She Oak Ridge. This is the original site that Len Bedell picked for Maralinga village in 1954. And the reason he picked it, he put a bore down here, or we bought a boring plant down from him, sunk a bore here, and he found potable water. Now, the water wasn't real good, but it was enough to get him out of trouble until they could set a desal plant up, which they did eventually at Maralinga. And he thought, right, this is the place we're going to build Maralinga village. There's plenty of shade around it there, a lot of desert oaks, a lot of she oak trees here. Just going to be an ideal site. But he said, I'm going to go up to the ridge to the west there, around about a mile. And he said, from a higher vantage point, I'm going to have a look and see if I see anything more suitable. So he said, we'll go up there and we'll check that out first. So he went up there, and once he got to the top of the hill, where he was going to look around the area and see some other better spot, he realised that that's where he wanted to have Maralinga village, on top of the hill. And Maralinga village is actually situated 363 metres above sea level. It's the highest point of all the mountain range. So it was an ideal spot. They had plenty of breeze coming over the top of the hill to cool the village down in the afternoon in the extreme heat and everything. And it was a lot better room-wise, and more area to actually build the village itself, because the village consisted of about 130 buildings, and it was a big place. So they lived at She Oak Ridge for 16 months while they built Maralinga village up on top of the hill. Then they shifted from She Oak Ridge up to Maralinga itself. Now we've just left She Oak Ridge, and we're heading to Loch McHugh. That's our dam where we collect all the water from the parking bay off the airstrip. Now the reason it was called Loch McHugh is that the bulldozer operator that sunk the dam down, his last name was McHugh, and he came from northern Scotland. And that's why when you get down there you'll see the way it's spelled, L-O-U-G-H. That's the way you spell Loch in northern Scotland. In southern Scotland it's L-O-C-H, like the Loch Ness Monster and that. These bitumen roads that we're travelling on now, as you can see, they stretch from Watson, 41 kilometres up to Maralinga village, around Maralinga itself, and then out to the forward area. So overall we've got approximately 241 kilometres of bitumen roads out here. And the British government, they needed their scientists to be out there working 7 days a week when they were setting up the atomic bomb test program. So the reason, if they had an inch of rain out there, they would not be able to go to work. So they heavily rubbered the roads, built the bitumen roads so they could work 24/7 if they had to. You can see the big culvert running down the road here. That's where the water runs, underneath the road. And as you can see, the dam's got quite a lot of water at the moment. When it's at full capacity, holds about 1.6 million litres of rainwater. And that water there, we pump out of here up to the halfway tank, and from the halfway tank up to the village, which is about 5.5 kilometres up the hill. And then it's left to settle there for approximately 12 months before it's used. But we've also got a blue light system on there, like ultraviolet light. So all our water is treated. So any taps that you've used around the village itself, around the caravan park, it's all rainwater and that. Now, the one interesting thing about this dam, it does go dry in the summer period, and that's when we usually clean it out. There's only about 6 inches of dirt in there. Clean that out because underneath the British bitumised the dam to hold the water, and then it was re-bitumised in 1994 by Thies Brothers when they came out to do the big project out here, the big radioactive clean-up project. Now, you can see the terminal building there, and that's the old terminal building that was here, the airport terminal building that was here in 1955 and completed in 56. This whole place, the airstrip and the village, only took 16 months to build. You couldn't build that under 5 years nowadays with all the occupational health and safety issues and that, but because these people had nearly 3,000 men in its heyday working out here, they had an inexhaustible workforce at the time. And as you can see on the big old Maralinga Airfield sign, you've got the British Rondell on the left-hand side, and you've got the Australian RAF sign, the Flying Kangaroo, on the right-hand side. Well, we've just spruced that up a little bit because it was starting to look quite down, and you can barely distinguish a Rondell. So we wanted to actually still capture the British side of it, but the Australian side as well. Now, the building's all aluminium. It was flown out here in the 50s on the old Bristol freighter planes because aluminium is very light, and they flew it out in kit form. Now, the reason they picked aluminium with these buildings because they had such an influx left over from the Second World War in the airplane factories, and they decided, well, we've got all this aluminium here, all we've got to do is press it into kit form and we can fly it out straight away. They can start building the village and that out here. So we'll go inside the old terminal, but just before we go in there, we're going to cross the Bridge of Sighs. And the Bridge of Sighs is quite a good little story because the British would get off the plane in the 50s and it'd be 50 odd degrees out here. You would have 1 million flies over you. As soon as they got off, the British weren't used to this sort of stuff. And they'd get to the little bridge there and they'd be looking around and thinking, God, are we ever going to return back to England? You know, we're out in the middle of the desert, we don't know what we're doing. Nobody's told us what we're actually doing here. So are we going to return? And on the other side of the little bridge, there's certain people over there that have already done 6 months tour of duty out here. And they're sitting on that side saying, thank God we're going home. They can see their plane is ready to go. So they named it the Bridge of Sighs officially in 1955, but also there's a Bridge of Sighs in Venice. And in Venice, it goes from the jailhouse over the bridge to the courthouse and then to the execution chamber. So 9 out of 10 people that walked over the bridge in Venice never returned. And I think maybe the British thought that when they got out here with all the flies, the extreme heat and that, are they ever going back to England? Because they did not know what they were letting themselves in for. They weren't told anything. All they were told is they're going to Australia, to a place called Maralinga, to do a secret project. That's all they knew until they actually got in here. Now, our Maralinga airstrip is 2.4 kilometres long, of full bitumen road, a full bitumen airstrip, with a 600 metre offshoot either end, on the northern end and the southern end. In case any planes ever overshot the runway, they had 600 metres either end to pull up in the white gravel and the dirt and that. So we're at the airstrip now, and as you can see, it is a big, big airstrip. At the time, this was the only airstrip in the southern hemisphere that could actually take the space shuttle in emergency. And the reason being, this 80 metre section on the end of the northern end that you can see on the darker bitumen here and on the southern end, underneath that is 5 metres of solid concrete. Now the reason they've got that there for the touchdown area is because the British were going to be here for 30 years, and they looked on the drawing board and they thought to themselves, their planes are twice the size on the drawing board of what they're flying now. In 30 years' time, they could be 5, 6, 7 times as big again. So they're going to they've decided to build the airstrip to cater for 30 years' time for their bigger planes. That way they didn't have to, every 5 years, add to it. Now they only spent 12 years out here, so they didn't complete the 30 years. But the airstrip itself was built for those specifications and solely for that purpose, to cater for 30 years' time. We have the Hercules landing here from the RAF, we have the C-17s. That C-17 is probably the biggest one I've seen come in here, but I believe there have been bigger planes again over the years. But but it's also not only the strongest airstrip in the southern hemisphere, it is also the widest airstrip. As you can see, it's wider than a normal bitumen airstrip anywhere. And you can see the airstrip from the air 50 kilometres away. The airstrip itself was built in 16 months, as well as the village, and like I was saying before, you couldn't build this project under 5 years now. Alright, now we're at Roadside Village, 20 kilometres north of Maralinga Village itself, and they named this Roadside Village because this is the junction where they enter the forward area. Now the forward area is where all the minor experiments and the 7 major atomic bombs went off, 17 k's to the north of us. Now, as you can see in the distance, all the sparse vegetation, we're on Teakins Plain. Now Roadside Village here was set up solely to house scientists, construction workers, mainly 200 Commonwealth police, military police, and they were out on all the junctions of the roads. Now you see by the big map on the wall here, it explains where all the roads are, and they go from 1st Avenue all the way up to 28th Avenue, and they stretch approximately 35 k's north of us here now. So our section 400 goes 35 k's to the north, and goes 40 kilometres to the south, and approximately 10 k's out to the west, and 28 k's out to the east. It's quite a big area, 3,176 square kilometres, and like I said, there were 200 military police here, and they were stationed on each little junction. So security was very, very tight, because this was the era of the Cold War, and I know it may sound funny, but they did not want any Russian spies sneaking into this place and finding out what the British were actually doing out here with the atomic bomb program at the time. Alright, now we're at Teakins Well, on the right hand side here, about 5 metres off the road, and you see the pipe work that's around the hole in the ground there. Well, that is actually Teakins' #1 well. That was the first well he dug in 1879, and like I said before, he walked through here in 1874 with Ernest Giles and some old underground gentlemen from Olympia Soak that knew the area very well, obviously from this country here. He was looking for a pastoral lease. So he came back in 1879 on his own steam. The first expedition was paid for by the Australian government, hoping to set pastoral leases up here for the settlers and everything. But in 1879 he came back and he paid for it himself, and he wanted his own pastoral lease. So he bought 2 well sinkers with him from Fowler's Bay, and they decided to put a well virtually right here where we're showing you now. And they'd sunk it down 26 metres deep, and they were still going. And this took 9 months to dig the 26 metre well, 26 metre deep well. Now, it's, as you can see, it's solid limestone they were going through. So all they had was old hammer and chisels, and crowbar, pick and shovel, and old windlass and that. That's why it took them 9 months to dig that so deep. They abandoned it after 9 months and thought, well, we're going to try another spot. So they went down the road a little bit down there, about 1.5 kilometres, and they opened up another well down there. And that well took them 8 months to dig, and that went down 27 metres, and they struck water. And he thought to himself, right, I've got my water in now. All I have to do is take some water out, take it back to Adelaide, show the Crown Lands Department back there that we've got permanent water on our site, because that was a regulation before any settlers established their blocks in any pastoral lease anywhere in South Australia at the time. They had to prove they had water on the block itself. So he said, right, I'm going to take some of the water back. He said, I think I'll just try this water out first and see what it's like. So he got a bucket of water up, gave it to the camel, and the camel just turned his nose up, would not even drink it, and just walked away from the water. Now he realised then there's something wrong with the water. When they took it back to Adelaide, they had it tested, and it was 4 times saltier than the sea. So brackish and mineralised and that if the camel didn't touch the water, he knew his stock wouldn't have it. So he'd had a dry well and he'd had a wet well, but the wet well was putrid water, so he abandoned the whole idea of even a pastoral lease out here. We do have a lot of water out here underground, but out of 133 bores out here that we've got, There's only one permanent freshwater bore, and that's what they call Lenny's bore. Len Bedell put a bore down in 1954 on the way to Maralinga to see if there was any good water out here, and he must have put it right on the water source because he tapped into good potable water. Out of 137 bores, it's the only bore out here. Now on the opposite side of the well here now, you can walk over there and you'll see where William Teakins actually had his big tent set up. He had his big bearer post and all that there. You can see his old wood heap and all that. And you'll see some iron droppers around it as well. Well, that's where Len Bedell found it in 1954. He knew Teakins' well was here somewhere, found the well, found Teakins' old camp, and that was some of the old memorabilia there. And so he put iron droppers around that, so that when the British were pushing the roads around there, and there's two roads there, you can see, one's about 5 metres from it, the other one's 7 metres from the old camp. He didn't want anybody destroying that part of history, because Len Bedell did think about the history of his place that he went to when he put the roads through. So he left those iron droppers there with wire at them, so nobody would actually demolish the old bit of history. And it's still here after 137 years. All right, now we're at West Street here, and you can see the big sign right in front of you. That's the former Maralinga nuclear test site sign, and they had to be put out here when the land was handed back to the Undergoo people in 2009, Maralinga people. And that was just to let any people coming into this site, if they saw these signs and anything was found out here, or they had any inquiries, they would actually have to ring these two numbers here. One was the EPA, South Australian EPA Radiation Branch, and the other one was the Maralinga office. Now, just before I do explain the boundary signs on that, what I do want to say is nobody is officially allowed into this site here and drive around this area by themselves. They can walk around the village, have a look at the area and stuff like that, which you people have been doing and everything, but they have to be escorted anywhere on section 400, either by myself or the site manager. Nobody's allowed to do it by themselves because it is still a restricted area, and even though it's owned by Maralinga, it's run in conjunction with the Commonwealth Government and the EPA. Now these signs here now, that you see, the small signs, they're written in Undergoo language, and you can see the symbols on them. You've got the radiation symbol on the top, and the next symbol you've got is a kangaroo with a circle around it, and it says there Gugabalya, which means the meat is good, that kangaroo meat is good. So you could shoot that kangaroo inside the radiation boundary area where there was radiation, even though it's all been cleaned up, just letting people know that there was inside there. But you're not allowed to camp here, because if you camp here and make a fire and cook that meat in the ground, that's against the regulations by the Commonwealth Government, and it's more of a safety issue. The radiation was all cleaned up in that area there, and it was all reburied and stuff like that, but there was radiation in there years ago, and that's why they just want to be safe. Now you'll see the signs are also 50 metres apart. Now there's 1,998 of these signs that ring 112 square kilometre area where the radiation was. And the reason they've got them 50 metres apart, that if Maralinga people ever came back onto this land and resumed their traditional lifestyle of hunting and living out here, they wanted to make sure that they saw these signs and realised that inside the area, that's where the radiation was. So, like I was saying, they can shoot the kangaroo in there or any other wildlife, wild turkey, anything like that, but don't cook it in the ground in there. Bring it out on the other side and cook it out there. Now, these signs here go all the way up to 10th Avenue and then 48 kilometres to the east, and they come back around Wright Street and all the way around behind us again. And these signs have to be monitored every 2 months because the camels use them for back scratches, and they bend the steel protective coat, the powdered painted coat on the signs, which is steel, and as soon as they bend, they rust very badly. So it's a requisite from the Commonwealth that we patrol these signs every 2 months, change any damaged ones, so that the wording and the symbols are all highly visible if anybody from Maralinga ever goes through this area here. So we change probably 6 to 8 signs every 2 months. Now up on the top there to the north, approximately 2 kilometres from where we're standing now, there's a big mound of dirt there. And in that big mound of dirt, which is known as the Taranaki Debris Pit, that mound of dirt there, that's got all of Thies Brothers machinery buried up in there that did work in the radioactive area at the time. Now, a lot of the machinery from Thies Brothers went out because it was decontaminated and it was safe to take out. It was working on the clean field. But anything that was highly radioactive is actually buried up in the debris pit up there. It's got generators, it's got buildings, it's got machines, it's got Toyotas and that up there. All the cladding from these sheds are all buried up there. So that big pit up there is mainly everything that Thies Brothers used out here that they couldn't take out. They had to bury it in there, and subsequently that's why they named it the Taranaki Debris Pit. Now the big pit down the bottom there, as you can see where the big wall is, that's known as the Taranaki Burial. That's where all the plutonium that was laying on the ground from the minor trials, not the major test, the minor trials, Vixen A and Vixen B trials, that's all buried in that hole there. Now, when they actually buried all that dirt in there, when they put 400,000 cubic metres of plutonium dirt in there, they had 400,000 cubic metres of clean fill dirt that come out of the hole they couldn't put back in. So what they then did, after they'd scraped 2 square kilometres out of Taranaki down to the bare earth, they used that clean fill to lay on top of that ground that had already been scraped, approximately a metre deep, and then they were able to revegetate that. Now, this is where Oak Valley people came into the project itself. Now, the project lasted 6 years out here by Thies Brothers, but Oak Valley people were contracted to do a seed gang, and they had experts with them from National Resources and all that, and they showed them where to collect all the native seeds along the Oak Valley Road that were in season at the time, down the Nullarbor all the way down to Yalata. And they gave those seeds to the revegetation people out here, and those revegetation people mixed the seeds in with the clean fill when it was dumped on the ground and then ripped by the big dozers. And as you can see now, the vegetation is actually growing back. It's about 1 metre high, there's some nice big trees there. That's one form of vegetation they did at the Taranaki area. But the other one was done with laying a windrow on the dead flat ground. Don't put any clean fill on it, just a big windrow, 1/2 kilometre long. Then left an area 5 metres wide, flat area, and then another windrow, flat area. And then the chap that did it was from Port Lincoln, a young fella. He came up with an idea of a special glue, and he glued the acacia seeds and the different wild seeds and that to the ground, and that glue broke up in 3 months. Well, in 3 months' time, the little seeds had already got a root in the ground. Because they're laying in between the windrows, the wind blows there, a bit of dust and a bit of topsoil blows in there, but water lays in there. And it was a natural garden bed, and as you can see down the road there, these trees, some of the trees are 25, 30 foot high now through there, and they're reseeding themselves, and they're dropping little seeds, and plants are all coming up. So his idea worked better than the other idea they had. So that's the big Taranaki burial pit. We'll explain that part to you. And the other little pit over the other side is the in situ vitrification pit. Now, that was a pit that was put there solely for when they melted 11 big burial pits out here. They used a big steel hood and hooked them up to 2.8 megawatt generators, 3 of them, and they poured power into the ground. British had left here in the 60s when they pulled out of here in 1967, and they wanted to make sure that they got those pits, made sure those pits were really cleaned up properly, because the British had left them in a bad state, even though they put a concrete cap over the top. So they put this big steel hood over it and got the temperature up to 1800 degrees Celsius with a big power cable from the generators and the big carbon electrodes into the ground, and they melted the complete pit and turned it to glass. Now, they could have covered that with topsoil, it would have been safe. The plutonium was all locked away in like a glass block. But they shattered, they went one better, and they shattered it with a rock breaker, and they reburied it in the small pit over there, which is the in situ vitrification pit. So there's your 3 pits: the Taranaki Debris Pit, the Taranaki Burial Pit, and the Taranaki in situ vitrification pit. And those 3 pits there have got bores on the south and west corner and also on the northeast corner. And they go down to the groundwater 66 metres deep here. And the reason they put those bores in to make sure there's no leaching from the 45-foot hole, the 45-foot burial pit that they bury the plutonium dirt in. There's no leaching into the groundwater. And so far in 15 years, when they've done all the testing, they haven't found any problems whatsoever. But we also have our Panzer scientists come out here at the same time. And those Panzer scientists do testing every year on the different burial pits and different sites around the area. And so far, everything's been good as gold. Same with the ANSTO scientists. They come out here and they study all the little native wildlife that goes into the ground, like the little ants or little lizards, and they catch the rabbits and that. Anything that digs in the ground, they like to study that. Same thing in 15 years, they haven't found any problems whatsoever. So there's ongoing monitoring that's paid for by the Commonwealth Government every year, and it's good because Maralinga go virtually get a clean bill of health. Every time that the scientists come out, it's all the same. You will see the rise of the hill. There's a triangular plinth sitting on top of it. It just denotes that this is where the British test fired an atomic weapon here named Breakaway in October of 1956. Now you see the vegetation here is very sparse. Vegetation only gets to 12 inches high here, and then it dies off, which is the saltbush and the spear grass. And the reason for that is when this atomic bomb went off, and it was sitting 100 foot in the air on a big steel tower, so it was positioned on top of the tower. When this bomb went off, it came down and vaporised the whole tower, vaporised 18 inches of the solid concrete base where the tower was mounted on, and then vaporised all the ground and melted it complete for 3/4 of a kilometre out in a huge big circle. So the heat was so intense here in one virtually millisecond to turn everything within 3/4 of a kilometre straight into glass. And as you will know, you melt sand and that to make glass. Well, this sand was melted and turned to molten ground. It's like, as you'll see shortly, it's like a greeny coloured jady glass here because there's copper in the ground, copper minerals in the ground in this area here. Whereas at Emu, you'll see the same effect up there, but the molten ground up there is black. There's more iron in the ground up there. But this one here, as I'm pointing out now to the saltbush and everything, what happens is the saltbush grows and it starts off healthy little plant and it goes down into the ground. Well, the roots get to a certain depth there and they hit the sterile ground, which is still sterile. And by that time, the top of the plant is 12 inches high. Well, as soon as the roots start dying off under the ground, the top dies off. And you can see all the bottom of the saltbush is all green, all the top's all dead. This is 60 years of regrowth here on this hill, and it's still only 12 inches high. But if it's only taken 60 years to grow this sort of height of a plant, Mother Nature's slowly coming back, but it's going to take a long time, maybe another 60 years before it even gets 2 foot high, if it ever does, sort of. So this is the force of what an atomic blast and the after effects happen to it. And this one was approximately 13.1 kiloton, whereas Taranaki was 26.7 kiloton. This bomb here, the breakaway bomb, is approximately the same size as the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs they dropped in the Second World War. The Americans dropped on Japan at the time. Now we're at Marku right here now. There's a triangular plinth down just behind us here. There's a brief story about the Marku crater on that. And then also you come and have a look at the big photo board and there's a big picture of the actual crater itself. Gives you a bit of an idea how big the crater was in comparison to the 2 gentlemen that are standing up on top there. One of those chaps, Sir William Penny. Sir William Penny was the head British atomic scientist from Maralinga, and he ran the atomic program for Montebello, Emu and Maralinga. He was even higher in the British hierarchy than the actual Prime Minister. He had more say anywhere over this area here and anything to do with the atomic blast than the Prime Minister himself. So he was very held in a high esteem. Now, this crater here contains, where we're standing right now, is actually standing on top of 6 Supermarine Sprite jet aircraft, fully operational aircraft in '56 when this blast went off. When I say fully operational, the planes were actually had their motors running, and the reason they did that, they had 2 tanks here as well, 2 Centurion tanks, countless Willie Jeeps, Land Rovers, Mack trucks, 19-pound field guns, a small village of 20 buildings. They wanted to see what would happen if an atomic bomb went off in one of the Australian cities or something like that, or a British city. Would the machinery that's there at the time, would it stop from the atomic blast, especially the tanks in wartime, and the planes? So the planes were running, the tanks were running, all the vehicles were running. They just wanted to see if it would stop the motors, the atomic blast. Now, it didn't stop the motors. The planes were still running, and the tanks and the vehicles after the blast, but 2 of the planes were damaged on the tail section. It broke the rear tail section off from the force of the blast, sandblasted all aluminium and turned it really shiny silver, but it didn't stop the motors. So they virtually proved if it was dropped on an airstrip, it wouldn't disable all the planes and the tanks and the vehicles on that airstrip and that. Now, the Marku crater itself is noted for the area that the limestone came out of. This was a sand hill where they put it on top of, with a few desert oaks and a few she oak trees, but it went down so deep at 45 metres that it pulled all the limestone out of the ground and threw it 2 kilometres out into the desert. So the limestone you see around the area isn't native to this sand hill here. It's actually come from 45 metres deep. That's just the effect of a 1.5 kiloton blast, which was probably 10 times smaller than the one that hit Hiroshima. Now, Tufi is exactly the same as Taranaki, or was exactly the same as Taranaki, I should say. It was a balloon blast. And when I say balloon blast, the atomic bomb was held up in the air by big steel cables attached to 3 huge balloons. Now, the balloons were like a cigar shape, something like the Zeppelin in the World War, and it was 80 foot long. The second balloon was 120 foot long, and the third balloon was 160 foot long. And these 3 balloons held a 4 to 8 ton bomb up in the air, the atomic bomb itself. Now, the bomb wasn't very heavy, like I said, 4 to 8 ton. So it wasn't why the balloons had to be so big. The balloons had to lift approximately 7 kilometres of inch steel cable up in the air. The balloons had to be stabilised, otherwise they could be blowing away to the north 500 metres or 400 metres away. So the actual blast wouldn't be where it's supposed to be. It had to be dead centre ground zero. So that's why the balloons had to be so big, because the cables stabilised the balloons, which then held the atomic bomb up in the air. Now, as you can see on the ground there, the big tie-down lugs, you've got your ground zero, then you come out 5 metres, and then you've got 9 tie-down lugs again. Now, these tie-down lugs, you can see that they're a big concrete base, 2.5 metres by 1.5 metres, and 4 metres into the ground, with big steel hoops, 2-inch steel hoops on them, to secure the cable to. Well, these concrete blocks in the ground are 42-ton blocks of concrete. So there's 9 of these around ground zero, approximately 5 metres out. Then you look over 50 metres out, you've got another 5 of these 50 metres out, concrete blocks, and then 400 metres out on the different roads you can see from here, 400 metres out, you've got another 9 double tie-down lugs again. So you've got your 400 metre arc, your 50 metre arc, your 5 metre arc, and your ground zero. All these steel cables are all up like big spider webs, holding that balloon steady up in the air, that's holding that atomic bomb 1,000 feet in the air. Taranaki was exactly the same. Now, I didn't explain Taranaki to you in that respect, and the reason being it's very hard because you can't see anything in Taranaki. It's all been cleaned up, revegetated a lot. But Tufi is exactly the same as Taranaki. And this one here, Taranaki, was 26.7 kiloton. The Toofy blast in 1958 was going to be 60 kiloton, 2.5 times the size of Taranaki. The Toofy blast also, it was cancelled 10 days before the atomic bomb went off. And the reason being is they signed the nuclear disarmament treaty between Russia, America and Great Britain not to do any more mainland atomic testing. So with this, with the atomic bomb stopped and everything, they had to dismantle it and take all the radioactive components out of it, all the trigger mechanism, the atomic trigger mechanism, everything had to be stripped out of it so that bomb was no longer dangerous. And then those casings were actually buried up on Eagle Hill, which is one of the photographic sites, about 1.5 kilometres from Toofy itself, in between Toofy and Gona. So Toofy never went ahead. That's why all the evidence is still here. And that's why I say to people, some people too, when I first came out here in 1972, and I was able to go out with Commonwealth Police on a patrol for a day while I was waiting here, I thought that I would be going out and seeing an area in the desert where an atomic bomb had gone off. The British went out there, put an atomic bomb on the ground, went boom, and that was it. I didn't realise all the infrastructure they had to build out here, all the bitumen roads, all the concrete pads, to set all the instruments up to record the effects of the atomic bomb. So I find this site as well really, really interesting. All right, this spot here, Gona, as you can see here, we're on top of a hill again. Every site we've been so far, apart from Taranaki and the Gully, has always been on top of the hill. The reason being for that is the British had to film every little bit of that atomic bomb before the bomb went off and after the bomb went off, when the mushroom cloud was forming. They wanted to record every second of the experience of the atomic bomb, before and after effects and that. So they had to have it on a really good vantage point where they could set the big cameras up 20 kilometres away in huge big concrete bunkers, so they wouldn't be destroyed from the actual shockwave or the blast itself. So that's why they put them on top of the hill. As you can see all around this area, you can see 30 k's around. This was the ideal spot like this on top of the hill to observe the atomic bomb going off. And that's why you'll see now, you've got your big concrete pad there. Now obviously there's no tower left here. That was taken away in 1966 when Sir William Penny was ready to pull out of this place and take his troops and his servicemen out of here. He wanted to make sure that all the evidence of an atomic bomb site was taken down and it was buried in the ground. So when he left, no Russian spies would ever be able to sneak in here when it was been abandoned and get any of their secrets. So every little bit of evidence from the atomic bomb site was actually got rid of, apart from the big tie-down lugs and I suppose big concrete blocks in the ground. Nobody knew what they were for. Same here. You've still got the big concrete block here. You've got the big trench down there and the big block of concrete on the end of it where the big power winch was. Well, that was all for winching the atomic bomb up on the tower. They didn't have 100-foot cranes at the time. So what they used to do was actually winch the bomb with a big power winch 100 metres away, and that would just pull the cable back up onto the big power winch, and as it's pulling it back up, it's lifting the bomb 100 feet in the air at the same time. And once they got up in the air, there were two sappers up top there. They had a gantry up there and like a portable crane up on top of the tower. They'd attach it to the bomb, swing it around, and then put it in position ready for the atomic blast itself. You'll also see tie-down lugs here for the tower. And the reason they had 4 of these tie-down lugs 25 metres apart, going off in each direction of the leg, on the east, the west, the north and the south sides, well, they were stabilising the tower itself, because if you pulled that the big cable that runs up the middle of the tower and down to the ground to lift the atomic bomb, the stress that would be on that tower as the cable's pulling the bomb up, the cable's actually pulling itself down, that would be stressing the tower and the whole tower could collapse. So they had 4 cables on each corner of the tower, hooked up the big tie-down lugs, stressing that tower out so it wouldn't buckle and fall down in the middle and everything. And this idea came out in 1952, used for the BBC radio towers at the time, the big 300-foot radio towers. So the British government actually commandeered the patent of the BBC and used it for their atomic bomb towers. A lot of people don't know that. The British government, if they needed anything, it came under that classification as a war effort, and they could virtually do what they liked on that. But I just hope that gives you a bit of an idea of what we've shown you today, and the area we've shown you, how big Maralinga was, and all the infrastructure that was out here that they built in the 50s when technology wasn't really advanced then. They had all the latest technology.